Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered. I'm your host, Cheps McFarlane.
As much as we share each other's perspectives, we have the opportunity to learn from one another.
Our stories are powerful and needed for the world.
It took a pandemic like this for us to think.
I have focused on using my art as a tool.
Because the opportunities are vast.
And we have a crucial moment on which to engage in that study right now.
We want more people on board.
For justice, equality, and liberty.
I'm your host here, Cheps McFarlane. Welcome to Unfiltered. Let's get started. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered. I'm your host, Cheps McFarlane. Thank you for joining the show. We apologize for the delay. We've had some technical difficulties bringing you the show today. Nevertheless, we are here. And we are happy to have a great conversation. We have a very lovely guest who's going to be helping us unpack a number of things today. And I'm very excited to bring her on board. As you know, on this show, we say the views and opinions expressed on this show do not represent the views and opinions of any of the employers of the host or the guests who come on this show. We're here to create an open space for frank, unfiltered conversations that helps us elevate our common humanity as individuals and as a collective society. So that being said, we have a great guest today. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about her before I bring her in. She's waiting in the green room. Our guest today is Ms. Vanessa Lesperance. Ms. Vanessa Lesperance is on a mission to increase kindness, joy, and purpose in the workplace through workplace spirituality. Since attending the graduate Beedie School of Business at SFU, completing her master's degree in leadership, leading on her own terms for several years in the telecommunication industry, and journeying to reclaim her Metis heritage and embracing Indigenous worldviews, she realizes that spirituality is the secret sauce to invoking heart-centered transformation in business to increase well-being. Vanessa has been published in the World Federation Association of Teachers Education Journal with an article examining leadership traits children's look for in leaders. Featured on the LUVS podcast, presented at the Fairleigh Dickinson University on Emotional Intelligence, and co-organized Strike, a half-day event encouraging people to step into their best lives. Based on her master's research, she has now created the Mindful Managers, a way to encourage and guide leaders to consider how workplace spirituality might positively influence workplace culture and decolonize business. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to bring you Vanessa Lesperance and we would have a talk. While she comes on, I encourage you. Hey, welcome aboard, Vanessa.
Hey, McFarlane.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I apologize for the delay there. I know you were waiting in the green room for a while, but I was having some difficulty connecting our stream to the Facebook Live. But we had that figured out, so that's good.
Good. All good. I hate technical difficulties. They're the worst.
I guess that's something, we have to accept as part of our technological evolution, right? Like this and things happen all the time. And, we just have to deal with it as they come.
100%. I just started a new work contract with Lift Collective, and for the last week, I've just been battling my Outlook, just trying to get my email to work, so I can empathize.
Right. And they keep updating these things all the time too, right? So it's like if you didn't turn your computer during when an update was going, then, all of a sudden you're in the middle of something and you have to get that update to continue, right? So
yeah, right.
Those are some of the little stresses of the technological advancement which we all embrace. But it is lovely to have you here today. What a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward to us having a great conversation.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you. So I just want to do a few house cleaning items before we head right into the talk. To all of our viewers who are out there, please share, like, encourage others to join, start a live party if you can. Leave your comments. We are always happy to receive your comments. And as the conversation goes, if you have any questions for myself or for Ms. Lesperance, please put it in the comment section and we will get to it. I promise you that. Vanessa, talk to us about, I know as I read your bio, you are Metis. Tell our viewers a little bit about your Metis heritage, your people, your journey to reclaim that Metis heritage.
Sure. Thanks for the question, McFarlane. Sorry, I thought I had my phone off, and then I just got a call right now, so I clearly didn't have the ringer off. So I'm just doing that right now. Yeah, so the journey, that's actually been a really interesting journey and exploration for me. I grew up not knowing about my Métis heritage and my Métis roots. So my Métis side is through my mom's dad, so my papa. And he was a very private man. He was very secretive. And how I found out is one day I was in my earlier or mid-20s, and I was over visiting my grandpa, and he decided to share with me family photos of his. I was like, wow, I can't believe it's taken this long for me to see family photos. But and so he had all these amazing photos. Like some of them were so old, they were like metal plated and etched in. So not even like on paper, like super old. And he was showing me all these photos, and like one photo, I guess it was like all the matriarchs in his family, and it was he told me it was his aunties or his great aunties, and there were all these women with like this dark, beautiful skin and long black braided hair. And I looked at it, I'm like, Papa, I'm like, your aunties are Native. And he's like, you think so? That's like, yeah, 100%. And so I started seeing more photos. I was like, oh my God, like I had no idea. And I was shocked. And my best friend growing up, she was part of Ojibwe. And when I found out, I called her. I'm like, I'm an Indian. Her and her mom were so excited for me. And so we explored it further, and we traced our genealogy, and we found out we have a lineage to Louis Riel. So one of our ancestors married Louis Riel's sister, which inevitably would have made him part of the resistance, which is amazing. And so we have copies of scripts in our family lineage. And so, yeah, it's just been like this beautiful process of like finding out and now reclaiming it. And so I wasn't raised with my Métis heritage or culture, obviously, and I'm mixed heritage, like my dad's Western European. So it's been a journey, but something I'm really, really proud of.
Wow, that's really important. Thank you for sharing that with us. And as we talk further, we'll talk a little bit about that as we talk on some of the things that you have been doing, because some of your inspiration has come from your heritage, right? So I'm going to read this quote, which comes from the Mindful Managers webpage. And you said that you were talking to one of the elders, and Chief Seattle, one of the elders that guided you through that research process, said that humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. I found that really profound in the way it explains us. And my, my question is, how can we reflect this wisdom and see each other as more human beings with imperfections, rather than the social constructs that we tend to have, like white, black, colored. And how can spirituality be a help in helping us see that humanity in each other beyond the social constructions?
Yeah, great question, McFarlane. That's a big question.
I know.
if I had the right answer, I think we'd solve all the world's problems. But yeah, going back to the quote you shared from Chief Seattle, he was like an amazing Indigenous leader, and I love that quote so much because it really speaks to Indigenous worldview in that all things are connected and all things are interrelated and interconnected. You compare that to like Western worldviews or Western dominant worldviews. We're all disconnected. Like I have my life and it's separate from your life, and I'm separate from like nature and the land. So it's like a complete 180 from Indigenous perspectives. And I think that when we collectively understand that what I do and who I am is indirectly related and connected to you, I think it helps to build on our empathy and compassion for one another, because we see we're actually all connected. Like we're not separated how our worldview in Western society tends to think. I shared an article the other day on LinkedIn, and it was by a scientist, and he even said that scientifically it's proven that like all our energy is connected, and my exhalation will eventually pass through you and pass through everyone else. Right. And the breath and air that we breathe in is the exact same air that our ancestors breathed in. So in that sense, we are all literally connected in that the same energy is passing through all of us. So I think when we realize that, we understand we are like one collective human family. Like we're not living separate lives. We are all interweaved.
Powerful. I found that quote profound, and I saw the article you referenced about our connecting energies, and it was really profound to me. In fact, I shared that article, and I think I captioned it hashtag what was it? Is it mindfulness is wellness or something?
Kindness. I think you said kindness is wellness.
Wellness. Yes, that's what it was. Kindness is wellness, because it was talking about how, through kindness we can experience wellness, and also talking about what we're going to be talking a lot about, which is spirituality. How being a spiritual person and having that spiritual clarity can also affect what you project out there in terms of energy, right? But let's get right into it. Tell us how you got into spirituality and your fascination with it, up to the point that you were pursuing your master's degree research on that topic.
I would say it's twofold, McFarlane. First of all, there's like the well-being aspect, and like the mental health. And in our society, we're facing such a huge epidemic. Like, yes, we have COVID, but before COVID, I would say a huge epidemic we've been facing is mental health. So like depression and anxiety. In the research I've done and in the literature, it shows that social isolation is on the rise. And knowing that, and also having like really firsthand close experience, being raised by my mom, who was schizoaffective, I saw like how lonely and polarizing depression is, and how it has such a negative impact on people. So having an understanding of like, just collectively, there's so many people going through so much just shit in terms of their mental health. And on top of that, like there's like a sense of disconnection from one another. Right. So I see that in addition to like just bad and toxic work environments, and just like so many stories, just like sharing from my friends and just talking just like anecdotally about like just really bad work environments and really bad leaders and really bad bosses. I'm like, how can we bridge this gap? And to me, the answer, the secret sauce, is in like spirituality, because really that's the missing component in workplaces, because that's one thing that's largely missing. So I want to explore if organizations start to just embrace or talk about or just normalize spirituality in the workplace, how might that shift well-being and mental health for collectively in organizations? In addition, how can that possibly improve work environments too and improve leadership practices? So yeah, that was kind of like my driving motivation to study that.
Very fascinating. And you've also talked about that connection between ourselves, but also the societal things that are prompting perhaps our suffering, whether it's oppression, stress, anxiety, mental health. In the Mindful Manager, you talk about you talk about this holistic self. You say your goal is that people should report to work and have their holistic self, not another self. That is, they should arrive at work in all authenticity of their emotions, their struggles, just their real self. Can you talk to us a little bit about that holistic self, mind, body, spirit, emotions, and all of that?
Yeah, so that's also been like a huge influence based on Indigenous worldviews. Specifically in Ojibwe Nation, they have the medicine wheel, which I wear right now as a pin. It's a heart pin, but yeah. So the medicine wheel represents many things, and there's many different teachings. But one of my understandings of the medicine wheel is traditionally it's a circle, so it's not a heart. So the circle represents wholeness, right? And a continuation. And then the 4 different quadrants represents mind, body, emotion, and spirit. So really, as a person, we need to honor all 4 parts of ourselves in order to be truly well. And from what I've observed and from participants, and you might agree too, McFarland, that in many workplaces, we're welcome to bring our mind and our body. Like that's what employers want and that's what they expect. Only until recently, I would say maybe the past 10, 20 years, there's starting to be a focus on emotion. So let's talk about like mental health and mental well-being, which is great. But still, we have that 1/4 part that's missing, and that's spiritual well-being. And we need that 4th part to be totally complete and totally holistic. So yeah, that's what that's based on.
So just to break it down, give us a little descriptive narrative of what spirituality is, because sometimes people confuse this with organized religion, right?
Yeah,
and so
100%.
So please, talk
so
to us about that.
Yeah, and actually, that's an awesome point, McFarland, because from my research and from the literature and from the participants, they said that one of the reasons why organizations are kind of fearful to embrace spirituality is because it can be vague and unclear. So unless there's like a common understanding or a common language that everyone is on the same page, then it kind of gets precarious. So based on the research and based on the literature, a working definition for workplace spirituality that I've come up with is workplace spirituality is just about organizations or workplaces acknowledging that we are made of 4 components, which is mind, body, emotion, and spirit. And it's also honoring and respecting the fact that everyone and everything is connected and interconnected. And based on that understanding, that realization, it increases compassion and empathy and relationships when we know that we're all in it together.
Right.
And based on that, it also supports employees to really hone in on what is meaningful and things that are meaningful and bring purpose to them in the workplace. And it transcends the mundane because they're working towards something bigger than themselves. So that's kind of a working definition or the concept of workplace spirituality. And to your point, it has nothing to do with religion, which is another reason why organizations tend to shy away from it.
Wow, fascinating. So I want to ask you this because you're also a facilitator and a business coach. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the work you do there. But you also talk about decolonizing business. So can you juxtapose for us, what we're talking about here, workplace spirituality and embracing that versus our corporate culture, which I believe is when you talk about decolonizing business, it touches on corporate culture and corporations and all of that.
Yeah. So in terms of decolonizing business, it's a well-known fact that when colonizers came, they established like modern day business practices and how organizations are structured now. So they took their values and their belief systems from Western Europe, came to North America, and that's how things were established, right? Like based on their worldviews, which in part and parcel, it's very based on the patriarchy, right? So it's very male dominant. And also because North American society, because of the settlers, our society is also based on Christian principles and ideologies. So that means that organizations today, the default is Christianity because that was the values that the colonizers and the settlers brought, or the accepted way of, or the accepted culture is secular. And either way, that's superimposing a belief system on people and on employees. So the way I see it is one way to decolonize business is by embracing other worldviews, especially worldviews that have been marginalized. And that includes Indigenous people, especially in Canada. Like we are here, this is their land, right? And their worldviews have essentially been pushed to the side. Yet what's ironic is I believe that like Indigenous worldviews and belief systems, like for example, like 7-generation principle, like making decisions or thinking about how decisions impact 7 generations into the future. Like how different would our world be if that's how business leaders thought instead of just short-term gain, right? So I think our planet would be in a lot better, in a better spot environmentally if we were thinking about long-term thinking. Part of that is also balancing energies. So instead of just having male dominant energies, it's bringing that balance and honoring like feminine energies as well. And that's one way to also like counterbalance and incorporate Indigenous worldviews. And lastly, it's about spirituality. Not to paint every Indigenous person with the same brush, but many Indigenous worldviews hold spirituality as a very important part, believing that everything has a spirit and everything's connected by that same spirit. Yes. So when we start to embrace and acknowledge those worldviews and bring it into the workplace, well, then we can start to decolonize how things were before by acknowledging and respecting and honoring other worldviews and seeing them as just as legitimate and in fact something that our world desperately needs to help heal the planet and heal humanity just collectively.
Right. So I'll just take a question from one of our viewers, and I want to say hello to all of our viewers. Tiffany and Rita, hello to you.
Hey, Tiffany.
You joining Tiffany. Tiffany is a mutual friend to both of us, and so she was just pointing that out. Wesley Petit, hello everybody. Paolo Dino, Melanie Shaw, and I'll get to the others. But Wesley has a question. He says, where does the motivation to embrace the teachings of spirituality come from? Does this motivation becoming more widespread require a rearrangement of power in society, or are there signs that current authorities are getting the point? I think you've just been talking on some of this, but if you want to respond.
Can you repeat the question one more time, McFarlane? It was a question.
So he says, where does the motivation to embrace the teachings of spirituality come from? That's the first part of it.
Okay. I would say part of it, I would say I've always been spiritual myself. I was raised Catholic, but that didn't really resonate with me. I would say my family, we were nominal Catholics. We would go to church. We especially go to church on special holidays, like Easter, Christmas. But that was the extent of it. And then in my late teens, early 20s, I became Protestant, and I was what I would call a holy roller. I was really into church, and I would go several times a week. And then just through the process of going to university, studying English, and just learning the history of the church, I realized that didn't really make sense to me either. And so I started to explore other worldviews. This is before I found out about my Métis roots and my Métis heritage. And so I traveled to Bali, and in Bali, they're really the main religion there is Hinduism. And so I started to look into that and realize that how beautiful that is, and just honoring and respecting all living beings. And then I started to explore Buddhism and Taoism, and now I'm really immersing myself into Indigenous worldviews, especially Métis spiritualism and Ojibwe culture. So it's just something that's always been a part of me, and that's always just really resonated with me, because I see the power in it, and how uplifting and empowering it is. So whatever your belief system is, when we connect to our higher self or our higher consciousness or higher being, it really helps to support us and just have a sense of joy and well-being. So just knowing that for myself, and I see that for others, and so my hope is for others to experience that too.
Right, and I would agree with you, because for myself, my gateway into spiritual awakening was through my own Christian roots. Similar to you, I started out growing up Catholic. I was an altar server, very dedicated to that. And then I transformed into finding Christ in Pentecostalism, and and I expressed my way, and I really started to connect my spiritual self separate from the physical acts of engaging in organized religion, right? And that led me to start to explore, and read about Hinduism and Buddhism and other spiritual experiences, and even like you talk about native spirituality, look at all the teachings that come from there. And then you begin to see that there is a connection in the spiritual sphere. It's only in the physical where there is all the divisions, in the spirit world, the respect, the teachings are common, the things that you have to do are the principles are common. There's no differentiation. But in the physical, we tend to always divide these things. And that's why I asked you the very first question I asked about our social construct and spirituality. But I want to bring you to something very important that happened today. So there was the First Ministers conference or call that happened. And the First Ministers put a statement out on anti-racism. And so, as it always is, they condemn all forms of racism, discrimination, intolerance, and bigotry. They are determined to combat anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous, and anti-Asian racism, and hate, as well as anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. They said hate has no place in Canada and it will not be tolerated. They went further to say we need to focus on removing social and economic barriers and providing economic opportunities and leadership roles in communities across Canada. That is the part that really hit a nerve with me. And you were talking about decolonizing business, and you were talking about spirituality in the workplace, and you have talked to me, not yet on the show, but personally about some work you are doing with Indigenous youth as a business coach. Can you tell us what this means, that the First Ministers, including the Prime Minister of Canada, are saying that they want to focus on removing social and economic barriers? So what are some of the things that they need to do? Because obviously when it comes to the corporate world, to entrepreneurship and business, Indigenous communities, Black communities, minority communities are often at the back. And that is why we have that gap that breeds into some of the social things that we experience, or the social ills. So since you're doing that work, tell us a little bit about the work you're doing with the Indigenous youth as a business coach, but also tell us how these ministers can make this statement more profound.
Sure. Well, first of all, the work I'm doing, it's called the 3C Challenge, and the 3 C's stand for culture, commerce, and community. And it's a partnership with the BC Aboriginal Association of Friendship Centers. It's a mouthful, and LUVS. So it's this amazing program where Indigenous youth between the ages of 15 to 29, they sign up for a program. Pre-COVID, it would be a 3-day intensive business training. Now it's online. We're doing shorter days, and it's 5-day business training. And then they essentially get 30 to 45 days to plan and operationalize their own startup business or a pop-up business, and they're given a $1,000 microloan. So I've been coaching a few teams on that journey, and it's been amazing. And it's just like, it's a crazy, like, it's such a short time. So it's like a whirlwind. But it's amazing to see what they do and what they accomplish in that short window of time. And all the teams that I've supported have been profitable, which is awesome. And they start to see what's possible, and they start to see, well, maybe I don't have to work for an employer. Maybe I can work for myself. Maybe I can, solve some challenges or issues that I see in the world. So it gives them a lot of autonomy and empowerment and build some skills too. So that's my work with the 3C Challenge. And then your other question is how to support Indigenous businesses or Indigenous people in business. Was that a question, McFarlane?
Right, and beyond Indigenous people, but all of the traditionally oppressed groups and communities. So Black people, immigrants, or minorities, if you prefer that term, because it seems what the First Ministers are saying here is that they recognize that economic opportunities have not been the same, and so they want to do something about it.
Right.
But how can they do something about it? And I'm just asking you because you're already working with some young people who are doing something about it from their own community standpoint.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind about that, McFarlane, is a lot of organizations have diversity and inclusion departments or offices in their organization, which is amazing. So that's a good start. However, at least when working with Indigenous peoples, what I see is that, okay, so we have this diversity and inclusion office or program. We're committed to hire X amount of employees in this demographic. That's great. But then you get to that point, and then you hire these people and you expect them to conform to the standards of that business or that organization, or you expect them to assimilate into how things are done there. And so really it's like, okay, well, you can get hired, but you have to do exactly how X, Y, and Z to get this job, which might not be what you're used to. So instead of the organization trying to suit the the needs of the people that they're trying to hire, it's like, no, you conform to what we need and we'll hire you. So it's different things, like different forms of outreach. Instead of having people come to the organization and do a panel interview, maybe it's going out to the community and doing interviews there. It's about forming relationships first before being like super formal in this like really uncomfortable environment that might be intimidating for people, especially young people without work experience. So it's how do you meet your people you're trying to recruit, like halfway. Instead of expecting them to conform to what you need, it's like, okay, well, what do they need, and how can we support them in order for them to be successful? So yeah, it's one thing to have diversity and inclusion. That's great, but it's also another thing to see, okay, well, what are our worldviews? Like, what are our ideologies? How are we superimposing that on others? And how can we change so we are more inclusive?
I couldn't agree more with what you've said. Now, there is also some talk loosely about a 4-week work day in Canada, and I think the Prime Minister was asked about it, and he acknowledged that is a thing. How does that factor into this spirituality, mindfulness, wellness, well-being, within the context of our human experience? RB work is part of that.
Let me think. So, can you say it again, but in a different way, McFarlane?
Right. So there's this talk about a 4-week work day, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, being an expert on how spirituality really helps in the workplace, mindfulness, well-being, connecting the emotion, spirit, and the physical. How do you think that having a 4-week work day, would help enhance all of these other experiences? And further than that, how we experience our human self and how we share that with each other.
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that question. And I love the idea of a 4-day work week. I think part of the research I did on workplace spirituality, I asked the participants, like, what is a benefit of workplace spirituality? And one of the things mentioned is greater work-life balance. So really, it's a shift in our society, in our culture. There's like, we worship busyness. Like, oh, I'm so busy, and my self-worth is how busy I am, right? So we're always doing like multiple things. But when we give way to just being and just have time just to sit and reflect and be silent, then that allows us to be our best selves, instead of filling every single moment of our schedule. So when we're allowed or given that time for a break and to reflect, then really that allows us to reconnect to who we are and to our own essence and our own spirit. And then we can be better, and we can show up better for our families. And so if we have more time for our families, then there's like less stress around that. I know a lot of my friends who are moms, they have so much mom guilt. So to have that extra day, to have that balance for their professional lives and also for their family, would do a world of wonder. And just time to reflect and just connect with friends and family. One of the concepts of workplace spirituality is largely about connection. So either connection to self, connection to other people, nature, or a higher power. So I see if we had a 3-day weekend, so to speak, it would give way for that connection. And so we can recharge, recenter, and then show up even better for our workplaces. So I think it's a win-win. It's a win for employees and it's a win for workplaces.
And tell us a little bit about how spirituality helps you really listen to the other stories, because just following up on what you said, we are always so busy because, being busy is how we factor how we value what we are doing and our productivity and what we're doing. But talk to us a little bit about how that spiritual space of silence, of reflection, really tunes you to be able to also listen to each other rather than just hearing others speak.
You know what? It's so funny. The last focus group I had was a few weeks ago. That exact same sentiment came up. And one of the participants said, so often in workplaces, like bosses or leaders or managers are just talk, give direction, but they don't actually take the time to sit down and listen to their people, or sit down and find out, okay, what's going on for you, right? Or to ask a question and sit down and intentionally listen. So yeah, just the act of being super present and being mindful with someone. If you're in a one-on-one meeting or a group meeting, to be really present and to listen attentively is really it's an ultimate sign of respect, and to acknowledge who you are as a human, just your humanity. So so I love that how you mentioned listening and being engaged, because that came up in my last focus group. Go ahead.
No, sorry. And I just wanted to throw this in there because we're talking about that. So you facilitate something called a circle of discussion focus group, right? So just give our viewers a little bit of a background of what that group is and what you try to accomplish in those sessions.
Oh, yeah, sure. So the circles that I'm doing is just part of my research. So it's a continuation of my research. So I'm done my master's degree, and but my sample size to complete my master's was quite small. So what I really want to do is honor more voices and more perspectives in the data. So I have like a more robust sample size to say, okay, like what are the trends? Like what are people really saying about workplace spirituality? How does it benefit people? How should it be incorporated? Should it be incorporated? So so I'm holding these focus groups. I'm going to be doing them semi-regularly. My goal is to get to at least 100 voices represented in data. So if any of your listeners care to join one of my focus groups, you can find me online on LinkedIn or Instagram at The Mindful Managers. And I'd love to have you and have your voices and perspectives represented. Because I'm really, really passionate about this topic.
To all of our viewers and to those who are going to watch, Vanessa, she said, is on all these social media platforms. She's a facilitator, she's a speaker, she's a coach, and she's very passionate about wellness, well-being, mindfulness, all of that. Talk to us a little bit about, so we've talked a lot about spirituality, mindfulness, well-being, but I'm trying to talk about practical things that can be done in the workplace, right? So what would you advise companies? If a company came to you and said, Vanessa, look, we have 100 employees, we need some practical ways to get them engaged, mindful, to boost their morale, to ensure that their well-being is elevated while they're at work. What would you tell them? How would you advise them?
Yeah, so about that, part of what I researched was looking at workplace rituals. And really that's the best way I can say to describe it, because workplace rituals allows organizations or teams to really build the type of culture they want. So it doesn't have to be like these crazy big like ceremonies or like these weird rituals. It's actually just like really just simple little things that really help speak to people and help people connect to themselves and connect to one another, and allows them to be mindful. So some of the workplace rituals that came up in the research and in my focus groups was one, a lot of feedback I got from the people in the focus groups. They're like, just having these discussions is so fulfilling, and it brings me so much purpose, and it's so interesting. So just having conversations, so just facilitating conversations in the workplace. Of course, making an invitation, that was also came up in my research. Ensuring anything you do with workplace spirituality is always an invitation. It's never mandatory. It's definitely nothing you're ever measured on or evaluated on. So it's always optional. But having the option to include people in focus groups or in discussion, and like, what is spirituality? What does it mean to you? And what does it mean to us as an organization? And by having those kinds of questions, you can co-create what workplace spirituality means to your team or your organization. So that's one way. So, and you can do that like in lunch and learns, or incorporate it into your wellness or well-being programs at work. In addition, something that's really popular that comes up a lot is going out for walks, or maybe you have a team meeting in a park, or you have your one-on-one and going for a walk. And that allows you to not only get a bit of exercise, but just get outdoors and connect to nature. For so many people, just being out, getting that fresh air, feeling the sun, feeling the breeze, that in of itself can be a spiritual experience.
Right.
So getting outside of, your cubicle and like the fluorescent lights, and actually getting outside a little bit is something else that's come up in the research. And also going back to silence, building in time and really encouraging time for reflection and silence during the workday. So whether you encourage your people to build it into your calendar, so you're being intentional about taking time out and just reflecting on your day, reflecting what you need to do, reflecting on lessons learned, and or just taking time for silence and just clearing your minds. That's something else that's come up. In addition, another ritual is journaling. I have all my participants complete a 5-day journal. And I simply ask, just spend 15 minutes a day, no more, no less, just 15 minutes. And I give them writing prompts. And the prompts focus on different aspects of a spirituality, like connection or values or meaning and purpose. And one of my participants actually said she used that journal to close her day. And she found it was a great way to close her day and leave work at work and then be able to go home. And it served as like a clear delineation for her. So incorporating like rituals like that really helps to bring in self-awareness and also increase connection and build and strengthen relationships with other people at work.
Interesting. That is very, very good. And I hope a lot of people out there are listening to this, and they can certainly bring this up in meetings at work, discussions on how to boost morale and increase a sense of well-being and connection to the work. I want to ask you this question. You wrote an article where you talked about, your closet and your network, a reflection of who you are, and you talked about tidying, making that a discretionary decision on items to discard or hoard, and the literal and figurative associations of that. So you were talking about how your closet and your network could teach you something about how you go forward. Walk us a little bit, because I found that quite interesting. Walk us a little bit about that in itself, and also how it connects to your own spiritual cleansing. When you have to cleanse yourself spiritually, what are some of the things that could be, those things that you say you discard out, you tidy in the spiritual realm of your own being?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, bravo! You really did your research. You went through my blogs. That's impressive, McFarland. You're asking, how can you use that concept of like decluttering and being mindful of what you keep in your closet and who you keep in your close circle, but how you do that decluttering like internally, like spiritually?
Right.
That's a great question. I would say allowing, it goes back to reflection, really, like taking time to sit down and think, okay, what thoughts aren't serving me right now? Or what actions that I'm taking right now aren't serving me right now? And the things I'm doing, is it bringing me joy or is it bringing me stress? So it's allowing yourself to take that time to, whether it's just sitting down reflecting or prayer or journaling or even talking with a friend, like a close confidant, and just really diving deep and finding out what are my sources of joy, and am I doing that? And what are my sources of stress right now? And how or can I remove that? And by doing that, you allow yourself to start living in alignment. And I find that when we start to live in alignment, things start to come easily. You don't struggle, and you feel a sense of lightness, and that you feel like, okay, I'm on the right track, and you get a sense of momentum. Whereas when you're not on the right track, things feel heavy. You feel burdensome, and you feel constant stress. So if you're on that path, just take the time out to sit out and say, okay, what can I release? What am I holding on to? What can I release? What's not serving me? And then you can start to reprioritize things.
Very well said. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. And I told you that it's going to be like a conversation, right? No cross-examinations, nothing of that nature.
I appreciate that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been watching us, this is Unfiltered, and our guest here is Ms. Vanessa Lesperance, and she's been talking to us about mindfulness, spirituality, well-being, with a focus on the workplace, drawing from her Metis roots and her experiences, learning about her Metis roots and learning the Indigenous worldview and practices. I just want to give a shout out to Macmillian Mocom, to Tiffany and Riddle, Balin Kang, Patrick Young, Keenan Pratt, Paolo Dino, Wesley Petit, Melanie Shaw, and Vanessa for joining us. It's been a great conversation. There is more that we can talk about, but we have just the hour and we're coming up to it with our late start. But I want to go ahead as we wrap up and give you an opportunity to give us some of your reflections of the times. We're still dealing with COVID, lest some people forget, even though we're having restrictions lifted and all of that. It's still very much alive. We've seen, the rise around the globe in solidarity against anti-Black racism, especially as it relates to police brutality. We've also seen episodes of that here in Canada with, police violence against Indigenous bodies. We have sort of the political crisis that is going to come out of as we, move away from the awareness of COVID as something that's really relevant as we begin to move away to confront other things. What are your reflections for people to sort of go through this time, think about it, what they can be doing just to get along?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of COVID is, the way I see it, it's been an invitation to slow down. It's been an invitation to not be so busy and going out doing X, Y, and Z. And it's been an invitation just to stay home. And so I've been trying to use that time to be reflective and be really mindful of where I'm spending my time and how I'm spending my time. And it's my hope that another outcome from COVID is we realize the value and how sacred our relationships are. I don't know about you, McFarlane, but like after a few weeks of not seeing any of my friends or anyone I knew, I'm like, this is hard and I miss my people. So I really hope that even though there's, despite physical distancing and things are like so weird, we really hone in on the importance of human connection and how important it is to our health and our well-being. So those are the two biggest takeaways for me, is just slowing down, being mindful and intentional about where and how we spend our time, and also really just honoring and valuing the people in our lives and our relationships, and not taking that for granted.
Very, very well said. I agree with everything you said. And one of the important things that I have reflected on is this idea of transformative relationships, because we can always find so many things to be divided about. But what are those things that we can find to transform our relationships, even when we are confronted and we have to discuss things that are inherently divisive, right? So that is something that I've really been reflecting about during this time. And I think given all of what we have seen happen, that is the kind of mindset that I think would really help us move beyond as a human race, and really go into the future with a view to experience our shared humanities in ways that benefit everybody, so that there's no oppressed and the oppressor, and that inequality is something that we talk less and less about. So those have been my big things. They are difficult because at times you think you can't solve all the world's problems, but at the same time you reflect about what can we do more, so that there's less inequality as there is. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that specific issue of inequality in the world right now.
Oh God, where do we start?
Right.
To your point about these difficult and divisive topics, I think it's really important that we start having those conversations in a work environment. And I think traditionally and historically, we've always shied away from having difficult conversations. But if you work for an organization, or if you have an organization and you can create a space that's safe and that where people can have dialogue and come and be their true, authentic selves, I think, and people are just real with each other. Like, they speak their truths. They speak from a place of truth and not accusation, and they're coming from spirit and not ego. I think when you can facilitate those kind of conversations, especially in a workplace, instead of division, you'll find that it actually starts to bring people together. Because when we sit down, and you might have one viewpoint and I might have another, but when I actually hear you out, I see where you're coming from, and I have that empathy, and I start to see my worldview shift, because I understand how it is for someone else. And even though people might not agree all the time, it's important to just have that empathy and just understand where other people are coming from. And so imagine if workplaces start to have these brave conversations, and they're not fearful. Instead, we can have this dialogue that will help to increase understanding and start to remove our own blind spots, especially people who are coming from a place of privilege or from the dominant culture, and understand how they may be unknowingly contributing to colonizing thoughts or oppressive thoughts without realizing, right? But when we can have those conversations, especially in a work environment, I think it really has the potential to bring people together and actually make teams stronger, because people feel safe and they feel valued, seen, and heard.
Right. Thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful conversation, and I would love to have you again on the show. This is a huge topic. There are so many facets of it. We sort of focused on workplace, but we touched on other things. So, I would love to have you back so that we can explore other aspects of where, spirituality can really transform our human self and consciousness and elevate us to that realm where we are operating in the fullness of love, well-being, kindness, and wellness.
Yes. Preach it.
So thank you so much. And you've talked about something which is really, really important, which is empathy. How about we close on that? Be kind to each other and be empathic. Listen to each other's stories and refrain from accusations, because that breeds division and divisiveness. Thank you so much, Vanessa. It's been a real pleasure. And I know it's still early in the day there for you, so hopefully you go out and enjoy the Saturday. I hope the sun is shining. It's not raining in Vancouver.
No, not today.
All right. So, fellow viewers, thank you for joining. That is Unfiltered edition for this Saturday. We look forward to having you next Saturday. We have an incredible show lined up for next Saturday, and we'll be continuing on topics that are of interest to you and that are relevant to the times we're dealing with. From me, have a great, great evening.
Thanks, McFarlane.